Hi everybody, my name is Darren. I'm an alcoholic. God's kept me clean and sober since June 3rd of 2004, and for that I am incredibly grateful and grateful to be here. And thank you, Terry, for asking me. I will tell y'all, I do a disclosure every time I talk. It is not one of my favorite things to do. I'm not one of those people that's like, oh good, I get to tell my story, I love that. But what I've been taught, and you guys have taught me, is that when y'all ask me, I say yes, because this program has saved my life and given me a life that I never would have had it not been for the 12 steps and for Alcoholics Anonymous and being able to be sober one day at a time since June 3rd of 2004. Also, listen, today's been a little bit of a crazy day. I was in a wreck earlier today. A lady ran a red light and ran smack dab into me at Oak Lawn and Wycliffe, so that was about 2 o'clock today. I have had a whole lot of water to drink, and I had a really spicy chicken sandwich for dinner, so we're just going to roll the dice and see what happens. It may be, if you see me running out of the room, it's probably not because I'm trying to run away from this, but who knows what's going on with my self. The book tells me I'm supposed to tell y'all what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like today, and I'm going to do that to the best of my ability. I am the youngest of 4 kids. I was born in a little town called Olney, Texas. We weren't from there. My parents were from Lubbock, and we had gone to visit my great-grandmother who lived in Olney, and I decided to arrive about a month early, and so that's where I was born and came into this world. And when I was born, my mom turned 26. She turned 26, and I was born 5 days later, and my dad was 28. And I was their 4th child. They had an infant, a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 5-year-old. I should also tell you that both my parents are recovering alcoholics. Having 4 kids at that young of age, I can look back now and think, no wonder they drank. I can't even imagine. I think by the time they were my age, I'm 53, their kids were all grown by then. They had 4 adults, and my dad got sober right before I started 7th grade, and my mom got sober in my 9th grade year. And I'll tell a little bit more about that in a little bit. But I mean, pretty much our house was kind of crazy growing up. 4 kids, young parents who didn't have a whole lot of tools, alcoholism runs rampant in our family. My mom's father died in an alcohol-related car accident when I was in college. My mom's brother died of cirrhosis of the liver earlier this year. My dad's brother died of cirrhosis of the liver when he was 42. My dad's father died of cirrhosis of the liver when he was 50. My dad's grandmother, she died with 50 years of sobriety, so she was kind of the first one in our family that got sober and kind of broke the cycle. And then luckily my parents were able to follow suit after that. So alcoholism runs deep in our family. I mean, the one thing I know, we don't have a whole lot of disease, cancer, heart disease, all that other stuff, but we have alcoholism and addiction that runs deep. And so that's what I knew growing up. I didn't know whether if you came home from school, if there was going to be a knockdown, drag out fight, true story. I'd have friends and we'd be at the front porch and you'd hear things slamming against the wall and screaming and yelling and crying. Or if I'd come in the door and my dad and mom, if it was kind of this manic state, hey kids, we're going to Six Flags or we're going to Carlsbad Caverns. True stories. Like they'd had knockdown, drag out fight the night before. We come home from school the next day and they're packing the bag and all happy and we're going to go on vacation. And so I was a tense little kid because you never know, like walking around tiptoeing about, okay, which mom and dad are you going to get today? But here's the deal. The first time I told my story, I think I was exactly the day I turned a year sober, a group asked me to tell my story. And it's a lot different than what it is now because my parents did the absolute best they could with what they had. They got married when they were 17 and 19 and then started having kids, a few years after that. They were both both alcoholics. And what I know today is they did the best job they could. And what they always did, there was always a whole lot of love in our house. My parents taught me some pretty strong values, even through all their drinking, about honesty. I remember a story of my mom. I think we were in elementary school, and we'd gone to the store, and, as you feed a family that big, filled it up. And she got all the way home and realized that there was milk and then she'd picked up some pictures. That's back when they used to have the photo marts inside the grocery stores, and she'd picked them up and forgot to pay for them. And she made us all get back in the car, drive back up to the grocery store so she could pay for that. And that stuck in my head. I remembered that. I was thinking, why would you do that? That's stupid. You got it for free. And that would kind of play out in my life later too. But but they taught me things like that. My dad was always a very generous man. Like, he was always helping other people and giving. And so what I know is that's the things I took away from my childhood. I took my first drink at 15. I probably could have used it a lot sooner. But I went to a party right before my sophomore year, right a few days before school started my sophomore year. And it was two girls that one of them was going to be a sophomore and one was a senior. And my sister was a senior, so it was all of her friends and all of my friends in the same house. My first drunk was on, this is a little bit foreshadowing too, was on peach daiquiris. That should have kind of told a few stories there that I don't know even how we knew how to make peach daiquiris or what we, I remember making them in the blender in my friend Julie's kitchen. And my sister decided she was going to introduce me to all of her friends because I was starting out in high school. And she comes to find me, and I'm laid out in Julie's room on the floor and can't stand up, and it's my first drunk. And what happened that night was I blacked out, I threw up, and I passed out. And that sums up what my drinking career looked like from there on out, until I found some other things that helped me stay a little more alert and awake, and helped me not feel as drunk. Every time I drank, I would usually throw up, I'd usually pass out, I'd always black out. And so I just thought blackout drinking was normal. And so, drinking just went on. That's what we did. In Lubbock, that's where I grew up. You drank on the weekends, hung out with your friends. I made really good grades, so I had my really smart honor school friends that I hung out with during the week, and then my friends that liked to drink and party. And there were a few people that crossed over, but not really. And I learned how to compartmentalize and have those two sets of friends. And so I drank. I started dabbling a little bit in some other recreational activities. Summer before my senior year, I decided I wasn't ever really scared to try anything. A friend of mine, Sissy, I love saying that she was a cheerleader. She's a cute little blonde, and she's like, "Here, I have this thing. Here, put it on your tongue." And it was a hit of acid, and I was like, "Okay." And then I was like, "Okay, what was that we just did?" And that was I've realized, at 5 a.m. when I'm sitting on the couch like this, I can't go to sleep, and my mind's racing. And so I did that, and then the first time I did X was my senior prom. It was still legal in Texas then. That's before they had made it illegal, and a group of friends, and so that's just, I wasn't scared to try any of that, and it was. We had a lot of fun, but alcohol was always hand in hand with everything I did. I liked to drink. It was my first love, and it was the thing I ended on when I finally came back into the rooms. So went to college, graduated. I partied in fraternity the first 2 years, and then I really got serious about school and somehow was able to kind of do the weekend warrior thing and drink on the weekends and really study hard and graduate. And then I worked in Lubbock for a couple of years, and then I always knew, from a very young age, that I liked boys and that I was gay. Early on, I didn't really know what gay, putting that word to it, and what it meant. I just knew I felt differently about my young boyfriends than I did young girlfriends. That, I looked at them in a different way, and you just didn't talk about it. You just didn't talk about it. If I was, just a good boy, and if I tried hard enough and prayed hard enough, God would just take that out of me, and I would meet this nice girl, and we would get married, and I would never have a gay thought in my life after that. That's not how it happened. So I struggled with it for a number of years in a closet, and then my job transferred me to Dallas in, I think it was 1992 or 93, and I had gone out drinking. I was here for a couple of weeks and went out drinking with my college friends at some bars and got just nice and toasted, and as I was getting ready to go home, I thought, that last time my sister drove me to the airport, we went down from her bank down that street that dead ended into Love Field. And I remember seeing, you drive past those bars and the ears kind of perk up and you're like, something's different here. These might, I was attracted to that and I didn't know exactly why. And so in my drunkenness, I stumbled into the Village Station on a Thursday night. As luck would have it, it was the Thursday night of a start of a drag competition. I think Miss Gay Texas or Miss one of those drag competitions. And so I was like, okay, this is interesting. They were having the competition on the main floor. And so I remember going out to the back patio, and I had on a white polo. I remember what I had on. I had on jeans and I had on topsiders, and must have been shaking because I walked to the back bar, and there was a bartender who I later became good friends with, Kathy Corbin. Some of y'all may remember her. And she reached across the bar and grabbed my hand and said, "Honey, we're going to get you a drink. It's going to be okay." So I guess she had probably seen a few of us walk in on our first time and be a little scared, kind of the same way I did when I walked into AA. Y'all kind of knew it was my first time there too. And that started off. I mean, when you're in your 20s in Dallas, in the gay scene, gay bars, there's somewhere to drink every single night. Monday night we went to Damewood's for Martini Madness. Tuesday night we went to the Cruise Inn. Wednesday night and Thursday night they'd had Village Station early. We'd go at 8 o'clock, and I think you could drink really cheap, like from 8 till 11. Friday nights we'd go to Club One. Saturday back to the Village Station, and then Sunday was tea dance. We'd go to 80 to do brunch, and this is about when Moby's opened up, and so we'd either go to JR's or Moby's, drink all day, and then when Village would open for tea dance, that's where we'd be. And that's for the next 3 years. That's what I did. I think my best friend Robert and I counted. We went. There was one time I think it was 37 days that we went to the bars every single day and got drunk. We kept a little tally. Okay, are we gonna do it again? And yeah, let's go. And so that's how it went for a while with drinking. And then, as luck would have it, drinking became not enough, and somebody offered me a substance that would help me to drink more, stay up longer, not pass out, not throw up as much. I still threw up some, but not as much. And so that kind of started my love affair with, first started out with cocaine and then with crystal meth. It got really bad really fast. So I moved to Dallas in 92. I walked into my first AA meeting at 2727 Lambda on February the 12th of 1995. So in that less than 3 years of living in Dallas, I had, made it to my first AA meeting. And the person that took me was my friend Robert that I told you about, that I went drinking for 30-something days. After one really rough weekend, he said, I really think you have a problem. So when your drinking and drugging friends are telling you, I think you have a problem, I did all kinds of stuff. Like, I was one of those that if you went out with me, you better have an alternate way home, because I would black out, get a wild hair, and I would be gone. And I'd have your keys in my car and your wallet, and you wouldn't reach me for 2 or 3 days. But that's really what happened to Robert and I one time, and he still hung out with me. So Robert took me to Lambda, and it was a Monday night, and it was a big book study. It was the 8 o'clock meeting. And I know I've heard some of y'all share, people say, well, I walked into my first meeting and I was home. Well, that was not my experience. I walked in and y'all were reading out of this book, and it didn't make a lot of sense, and it wasn't very crowded. So I don't know if y'all remember, those of you who remember way back the 27 days, it was a pretty big room, and there were probably 10 people spread out in that room. But I was, I didn't have anywhere else to go, and I wanted to get the heat off. And I had called my parents and said, I think I have a problem, because I knew they would help me out one more time financially. I don't know that all this stuff was like that calculated, that if I tell my parents I have a problem, they're going to help me. But certainly when I came in that first time, I was not ready to concede to my innermost self that I was an alcoholic. I just wanted the consequences of my drinking to stop. And so that kind of started my next 9 years. It was my first sobriety date. I had multiple sobriety dates in that time. That time I think I stayed sober 3 months. And then I moved, really fast. Like, as soon as I would get sober, like my job, I would quit. I'd start showing up to work on time, and like they would think I was doing a good job because I wouldn't leave early, or I wouldn't shut the door and fall asleep in my office for a while just to get through the day. And so I got a promotion. Like 3 months in, I got a promotion. I took a job in San Antonio with the same company, and I went down there, and I had 3 months, and I thought, okay, I've got this. I went to a couple of meetings. I'm like, their meetings aren't really quite the same way Lambda does it. I don't really think I need to go to meetings. And so, it was just a few short weeks before I was drinking again. And so that really started this pattern of me coming in for a while, going out. I had 2.5 years at one time, and I used to say 2.5 years sobriety. I was dry for 2.5 years because I didn't work a program. I didn't have a sponsor. I didn't go to meetings regularly. I would audit every once in a while and stop by a certain meeting if a friend was going who I knew was in the program. But just by the grace of God was I able to stay that 2.5 years without drinking and using. And then at the end of that 2.5 years, took a job in Austin and had no support system, didn't have a program, didn't have a God of my understanding. And so shortly after that, I was in a relationship and just spent the next 2 years bottoming out and trying to get sober and things getting bad and just went on and on and on. That relationship ended. We were together off and on for about 5 years. It got down to him saying, okay, you either quit doing the drugs, you can drink, quit doing the drugs, or you leave me. And I was like, see you later. I mean, like I wasn't, no one's going to give me an ultimatum. I don't have a problem. What are you talking about? You know, that was kind of that thing. And so I ended it and moved back to Lubbock. My parents, I said, hey, I think I'd lost 2 jobs back to back. I had pretty good jobs at a young age, making a lot of money. And, you know, they want you to show up every day, and they want you to not just not show up and call at noon and say, hey, I'm sick, I'm staying home. That didn't really fly. And so that last job I lost, and I called my parents and said, I think I'm going to come home and I'd like to go to school. And they're like, okay, great. We'll pay for your grad school. They bought a house that I could live in Lubbock. All I had to do was go to school. They paid for everything. That lasted for a semester and a half before I had quit showing up to school. And I was full on using crystal meth every day, drinking every day. And that was in 2001. I moved there, and I think it was in July of 2001. And so it's almost exactly 20 years ago. I dropped out of school by November of that year. I'd gone the summer semester and half of that semester and dropped out because I couldn't go to class. And then from there until my sobriety in 2004, the only thing I can tell you is the book describes it better than anything that I've ever heard. It's pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. I did things I never said I would do. I hurt people I never said I would hurt. I stole from people, family members. I lied. My only thing that was important to me was how was I going to get high and how was I going to get drunk that day. Now, if you'd have asked me, I would have told you, well, no, I'm a good guy. I'm really nice. I have good intentions. I mean to show up to see my nieces who are waiting on me to come pick them up. I mean to go to my grandmother's house for lunch because she's invited me 3 weeks in a row. I mean to, all these things I mean to do, but I couldn't do them. And, probably the lowest point was, I stole from my grandmother. My whole family was done with me at some point. My grandmother, the one I told you who died at 50 years sobriety, she was the one that kind of kept a lifeline to me through all of that. And she would talk to me, and she let me stay at her house a couple of times when I didn't have places to go. And I stole money from her purse because I needed to get high one more time, and I knew she always kept $200 or $300 stashed away in her purse, and I stole it from her. And then she confronted me the next day, and I was like, well, I didn't take, just bald-faced lie to her face. So what happened was, at the end of all that, I'd been on about a 9-day run of being high and drunk, and I think I slept for like 4 hours in the middle of that 9 days. And my grandmother at some point during that time had reached out to me and said, hey, would you please come for lunch on the 3rd of June? She said, I haven't seen you in a while. I really want to see you. And I said, okay, I'll go. And so that morning rolled around. I'd been up, of course, for several days. And I was like, wasn't feeling good. It was already hot in Lubbock. And I was like, I shouldn't go. I should call her. And something within me kept saying, you have to go, you have to go, you have to go. What I know now that was God putting me exactly where I needed to be on that exact day. That was my first real spiritual experience. And so I went. I went over to her house, and of course, she had little TV trays. She'd sit at her couch, and we'd sit and eat in her little retirement apartments. And I sat there and pushed food around on a plate, because I wasn't very hungry. I got up, and I started having this really horrible back pain, and everything was kind of going flush and fluttering, and I collapsed there at her house. And she called 911, and I was in the midst of a drug overdose during that time. I can very distinctly remember everything that was going on that day, that she called them and they're asking me, have you been doing any drugs? And I was like, no, right there in front of her. And then when they got me into the ambulance, I told them, yes, I've been on crystal meth for the last 9 days. And I've how much have you done? A lot. I've done a lot. My heart rate shot way up, and I remember they had to give me some drug that stops your heart to get it to before it goes back up, and it was like I was floating above my body and watching everything that was going on. I can remember the paramedic's face to this day, exactly what he looked like. And I remember having this prayer that came to me. It's like, God, please give me a chance to do something different. I don't know where those words came from. I don't know how. It'd always been, God, please help. If you get me out of this trouble, I won't ever do this again. But of course I always did. There's one time in particular, I remember we'd been doing cocaine. This was in those last few years, and I thought I was having a heart attack and had to go to the hospital, the emergency room, and they had to get me Ativan to bring my heart rate down and all that. And I was like, oh God, please, I won't ever do this again. And within 2 hours of being home, I still had a stash and I was doing it again. And so that was the insanity. You know, when the book talks about we can't recall from even, I think it says, you know, a week or a month ago, I couldn't recall from a few hours ago of like the how I'd been. This is another one of my spiritual experiences. I have a cousin who had 10 years sobriety at that time, who lived in California. She happened to be in Lubbock for the week. And when I was at the emergency room, she came to the emergency room and she looked at me. She snapped a picture of me. And every time I see her, she says, I still have that picture on my phone. Do you want to see what you look like at your very worst? I'm like, it's okay. If I start thinking about drinking again, I'll probably reach out to you and say, send me that picture. But she looked at me and she asked me a question. She said, are you ready? Are you finally ready? And I said, yes. And so she took me back to my parents' house. They were out of town and let me sleep off that night. And then the next morning, she came and woke me up, threw a phone book at me and said, okay, find a treatment center. She didn't do it for me. She didn't, say, well, I'm going to take care of this for you, or I'm going to get you out of this trouble. She made me do it myself. And so I started calling, went to the A's in the phone book and started calling and found a place like within the second call that was out in the woods, or not the woods, out in the country outside of Lubbock, a place called Managed Care, who would take someone with no insurance, no money, whatever. And that's where I ended up. And, her being there at that time to help give me the message of what I needed to do next, I know was a God thing, my second spiritual experience. And so I went to treatment. And I know not everybody needs to go to treatment. I needed to go to treatment because I needed to be plucked out of that environment of everything I was doing long enough to clear my head and to have a chance to do something different. And so I did I did a 5 or 6 day detox program and then a 28-day program. And then I got out. While I was in there, one of the requirements was the local AA groups would send people out and you had to find a sponsor and you had to do a 5th step before you could be released. And so I found a guy named Terry Don who went to the Lubbock group. He was my first sponsor. He was a motorcycle, bike riding, straight man that wore leather jackets, and this big, tall guy scared the shit out of me. But I sat across from him and told him my first 5th step, and I told him everything that was on there. Y'all told me that if I didn't do it, if I wasn't willing to tell him everything, that I would probably drink again, and so I didn't want to drink, and so I told him. And I got out of treatment on, I think it was July I turned 35 in treatment, or 36, one of those. Anyway, I got out like on July the 7th, and like 2 days later, Lubbock was having their Lubbock Caprock AA convention. And he was really involved, and he said, he didn't say, do you want to go to this convention? He said, you're going to be there at Thursday at this time. We're going to set up the hospitality suite, and then you're going to be there at 7 a.m. every morning during the convention, and you're going to stay there until the hospitality suite closes at 11 o'clock each night. And I said, okay. I just said, okay, and I did it. And what that did for me early on, I mean, another thing of God putting him in my life that taught me that service work was an absolute. And every sponsor I've had since then has always done service work, and it's just been, when you're asked to do something, you say yes. It also, before that, I just got out of treatment. If I'd had to walk into AA meetings in Lubbock and try and go up and say, hey, I'm Darren, I'm just out of treatment, I'm newly sober, all that, it might have been impossible for me. But what happened during me doing service work, I worked in that hospitality suite all weekend long with a bunch of other alcoholics from all over the city. And so when I walked into my first meeting on Monday after that convention was over, there were 4 or 5 people that I had stood next to handing out chips or fixing glasses of ice, and we had talked to each other, and so I didn't feel like I felt like I fit in. And that was the thing that taught me about service. Yes, services, we do that because we have to give back and we have to, give back to the program, but it also gets me, like, I don't know how to talk to you when I'm like sober and insecure and newly sober, but if I have a job to do and we're doing a job next to each other, then I can talk to you. And so service has always been a big part of my recovery, and people I sponsor, it has to be, they have to have some kind of service commitment along the way. A couple of things, the very first 4th step I did, that fears list, I remember there were like 2 things on there that I knew absolutely if those things happened to me, then I would probably drink. Or it was kind of my free pass. And one of them was if I found out I was HIV positive. I was pretty sure there was a pretty good chance when I got sober that I was HIV positive, because you don't do the things that I did for the length of time that I did it while using drugs and drinking and not put yourself at risk. And then the other thing was my grandmother, who was that one kind of mainstay in my sobriety. If she died, when she dies, I don't know if I can be able to walk through that. And so I remember those two things being on my first fears list. And in my first 2 years, just shy of 2 years sober, I had a weird deal. I was waiting tables at the time. That was the job I got that I could do after I got sober. And I kept having this leg cramp, and my leg kept bothering me. And so I had this weird, it's really a weird thing. I was watching CNN like that night after I'd been having these leg cramps, and there was a panel on there talking about DVTs, deep vein thrombosis. It's just the weirdest thing. There was this organization, I don't know if you remember the news reporter for CBS who'd been riding around in tanks in Afghanistan, had gotten the blood clot and had died from it, and his wife was part of this organization to bring awareness to blood clots. And I was like, I wonder if that's what I have. Well, about a week later, I started having side cramps, and it started like on a Tuesday, and then it would be really hard to breathe. And by Friday, I got up, and I was still smoking at that time, so I went outside to smoke a cigarette, and I started coughing. I coughed up blood, and I was like, okay, I don't think that's normal. I should go to the emergency room. So I called my sister, and she took me to Parkland because I didn't have insurance. And they checked me in, and I'd had a blood clot in my leg that had broken off and gone to my lung. And as a result of being in the hospital, they said, we want to run some other tests. And they ran an HIV test, and I found out it was HIV positive. I don't think if I'd have found that out when I first got sober, I don't know if I was ready to handle or deal with it. I think God took me to that exactly when I needed to, so that I had a little bit of recovery under my belt. I had a sponsor who happened at the time was HIV positive, and I called him, and he was like, okay, well, here's what you're going to do. First of all, get out a piece of paper. I'm laying in the hospital bed. It's like, what do you mean get out a piece of, do you have paper and pen there? Yes, get it out. I want you to write 5 things you're grateful for right now. And so I did it. And they said, okay, I want you to call these 3 people. And one of them was Chris F.O., not Chris F.E. And another was my friend Michael. And he said, I want you to call and tell them that you just found out you're HIV positive. And so you just share, that becomes you're willing to share that with them. And so what happened from that is I was living at the time with another guy that we'd both come in to around the same time, and he had been relapsing. He was smoked crack, and he would come home and he would, hey, I just got into your stash of money, or I'm sorry, there's a weird smell in the house. You know, all the things addicts do. I was getting to see it firsthand. And so that was not working out. So I was going to need to move, and I was looking for a place, and Chris called me back and said, hey, aren't you looking for a place to live? Because I had made that call to him. You know, I think I'm doing this to get through this HIV deal. And so he offered me a place to rent a room from him. And that kind of shifted my sobriety into a whole different realm. You know, by being honest and walking through this stuff that was so scary, God was taking me and putting me exactly where I needed to be with the people I needed to be with. And so Mike W., a lot of you may remember him, some of you, that he lived in the back house, and Chris and I lived in the front house. We didn't live in the quarters in the back. But we were like a little family. And then John P. and Keith and Lee, and there was a whole group of people that we just had a little sobriety community that we hung out, and we did stuff at the house, and we went to dinner, and we went to meetings. And one year we dressed up for Halloween. We had a Miss Middle Eastern pageant, 7 of us guys from Lambda, and we had burqas made with, I was Miss Iran, I know. It was really awful and not very PC, but you know, we did what we did. We had fun. I mean, like, we were sober and had fun, and we would go out in a group to the bars, and we would to go to the roundup. I mean, not the bar roundup, but the Big D roundup, and the Houston roundup, and the Austin roundup, and you know, some other friends. Then we did the P-Town roundup for several years, and we just got in the middle of sobriety and learned how to have fun in sobriety. And so I know that wouldn't have happened, or, you know, it may have, but it happened fast track because I was put in the right place. My grandmother did in 2008. I was able to, because I was still at that time, I think it was right before I had started, was it 2008? I may be getting my years mixed up. Anyway, I was able to take time off work and go take care of her when she was going through some health stuff. And so I got to go off and on back to Lubbock and take her to doctor's appointments and sit with her while she was in the hospital because my dad's business, he was like traveling all the time and he couldn't be there. And so I got to make amends to her. I got to make a living amends to her. I paid her back also, the money I took from her. But I got to go and just be there with her and spend time with her. And I was there when she was on her and dying in her deathbed, and I was holding her hand when she took her last breath. And you know, that wouldn't have been possible had I not been sober. I will tell you that if you've never had the chance to experience that with someone you love, it was a very difficult thing, but it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever experienced in my life. She peacefully went on, and I got to be there, and I got to be present. And I got to immediately, when she passed away, and we called the hospice company who was going to call them to come pick her up, I got to walk outside, and Patrick McSee was sponsoring me at that time, and I called him. And he talked me through, okay, here's what you do next. Okay, here's the next steps you take. I had a cousin at the time, this other, not the good cousin, the one that helped me, her sister. Here's a whole nother story. She would be what you would call a complete narcissist. When my grandmother had literally, she was there too, and my grandmother took her last breath, and then we walked out to the living room, and she, like, I kid you not, my grandmother had been dead for like less than 30 minutes. Who's going to get her china cabinet? And I remember thinking, I'm going to kill her. I'm going to kill her. I'm right here. We're going to have it. And I called Patrick. You're going to walk down the street. You're going to walk away. You're not going to say anything to her. And so, you know, just by working this program and knowing how I could take the next step and walk through it. And I don't have any regrets. I don't have any regrets with her. I was the grandson that she needed me to be, and I wanted to be in the last, years of her life. Let's see, 7:38. I have about 10 minutes maybe, or a little less. I couldn't really even tell you. All the things that I have in my life right now today are not the things that I thought I wanted back then. I thought I needed to be in the center of a big party in a big crowd, and I can't stand crowds now. I want to be in a very small group or home. I like spending time by myself. I like spending time with my husband and our dogs, and all those things that I thought like I craved. It was just really what I couldn't stand, is being alone by myself. I couldn't stand sitting with myself and all the, knowing how to like myself and just to feel comfortable in my own skin. And so, it was probably right at about 10 years sober. I remember I picked up my chip at another fellowship I also go to, and I sat down, and before I picked up that chip, I thought about it. I don't want someone else's life. I don't want your husband. I don't want your job. I don't want your money. I was perfectly content with everything that in my own life. I wanted the life that I have, and that still is true today. I mean, yeah, would a little extra money on certain days help? Absolutely. Would I drive by somebody in a car that I would love to have? Absolutely. I'm human. All those things happen, but I don't want somebody else's life. I remember Chris used to tell me, if we all took our problems out and threw them in the middle of the room, you wouldn't want anybody else's problems. You would take your problems back because they're your problems and they're your life, and how to walk through them and how to deal with them and what to do. And that's absolutely true for me. I was lucky enough I was one of those. I remember Mark C. was a huge part of my recovery in my life, all the way from beginning. My first sponsor here in Dallas, he was his sponsor, so he was my grand sponsor for a number of years, and he was my friend. And then later in life, he became my sponsor his last few years of his life. But I went over, one time I was at a Lambda meeting just before I met my husband, and I was miserable, and I was sharing, probably not very spiritually based or not very solution oriented. And Mark came up to me after. He said, "Hey, it sounds like you should come over for coffee. What are you doing tomorrow? Come to my house for coffee." That's when he was living at the apartment complex, and he wasn't my sponsor or anything. And I went over, and I had been keeping some secrets about some stuff about myself, like some feelings and things I had about myself that I hadn't been able to tell. I think Patrick was sponsored at the time, and for whatever reason, I hadn't been able to tell him, and I just told Mark all of it. I told him everything, all these insecurities, these things about myself, and we'd been friends before that, but that really started us this what I call a godly friendship, that we told each other the truth, and we were together I always felt the presence of God when I spent time with him, because we laughed. Oh my God, if you never spent one-on-one time with Mark C. in public, he was pretty freaking funny. And I know Donald spent some time with him too. We sponsored him as well. And when he moved to Arlington, I would go over and we would, when they were having to move really quickly from Dallas over to Arlington. I thought, well, I'll go help Mark. I'm going to be a good guy. Look at me. I'm going to go help him. And at that time, Patrick had moved to New York. I didn't have a sponsor. And what really happened was God placing me there so that Mark could say, you don't have a sponsor? Well, I'll work the steps with you. I'll sponsor you. And so that started us on this journey of that work together. And they moved to Arlington, and I wasn't working at the time, so I would drive over there. We would go to he went to a noon meeting in Irving, and then we would not Irving. Why did I say that? It was Arlington, the Arlington group. And then we would go to do his grocery shopping and go pick up his prescriptions. And, I told the story about the one time his pants fell down in the middle of Walgreens because he always had these belts that weren't tight enough to keep it up, and just laughed. I mean, he was just funny. And so anyway, I don't know where I was going with that story, why it came to me. But I remember when I went to his house that day when I saw him at the meeting, and I told him, no one's ever going to love me. I'm never going to meet anybody. I'm damaged goods. Nobody's going to love me for this, blah, blah. I listed all the reasons why people wouldn't love me. And he's like, drama queen, first of all. And he's like, just stop. He said, you just keep becoming the person that you want to be, that God wants you to be, or that the person you'd like to meet. And I can guarantee you someday, if this is what you want, you state that intention and you're going to find the person. And it wasn't very long after that I think I met Dave. It was probably a few years after that. And I did. I met a man who I love dearly. I tried to push him away for the first 6 months and said, this isn't going to work. It doesn't look good on paper. And I had people in the program, Mike and Chris and just different people saying, just give it a chance. Just quit deciding this isn't going to work out. And surely, one thing led to another, and we've been together now. This will be 10 years in December. And the thing that makes this work is that he understands that my recovery has to come before everything else. Because if I don't stay sober, then I'm not going to be able to stay with him. Because when I don't stay sober, the things I do are not really conducive to a relationship. I don't know about y'all, but I'm not very faithful when I'm using drugs and drinking. And so I guess I'll finish the last few, year and a half. And I could sit up here and tell y'all how hard it's been. It's been hard on y'all too. I'm not one of those that has loved Zoom meetings. I have not loved them, but I've also had a great fear about coming to meetings in person before getting vaccinated. And then even as the Delta variant, I've been kind of scared to come to meetings and do that. So I've been in this in-between place of I get on Zoom meetings and I resent it because I don't really want to be on a Zoom meeting. So I've been really grateful for the meetings. This group I've come to a few times. I've been going back to Sunday Morning Live some, and I've gone to another fellowship a few times. So I'm just really, really grateful for things to be, I don't know if they'll ever be normal again, but to where we can all be in the same room together and hug each other and hold hands at the end of the meeting and continue to do that. But I do know this, I am very fortunate. I talked with several of my friends, my single friends who are out there, during this time was even doubly hard on them than it was on those of us that have partners. I've heard some partner relationships it didn't do well on, but that's a whole other story. But that wasn't the case for us. First of all, we had experience. We both were unemployed for a year together due to some circumstances with his job, and I had quit my job in preparation for something else. And so we had that experience of spending a lot of time together, but we were really together during COVID. We sold our house in February, a 2,500 square foot house, and moved into a 900 square foot condo. And then March, things shut down, and we had him doing school from home, me working from home, 2 dogs, with an office, a bedroom, and a living room. And it was a little crazy at times, right? But we leaned into each other, and we love each other, and we didn't kill each other. And we enjoyed our time together. So I know we can retire together, hopefully one day if we ever get to retire. But that's it. And the other thing I'll say is sponsorship. I've been fortunate to have some really great sponsors. I'm not the easiest person to sponsor because I've got it. I don't need your help. I've got it figured out. I have the answers. I don't want to trouble you, you know, so it's really been a struggle for me to continue to just trying to reach out and reach out and reach out. But then the guys who have allowed me to sponsor them have saved my life over and over again. They hold a mirror up to me. Everything. There's never been a time that one of them is saying something to me or doing, you know, going through something that I haven't either done that day or you know, the year previously, or it's like almost invariably I'll be going through something and I have to give a sponsee, you know, share my experience with them, and it's something that they're going through right at the same time. So that's been my experience. So service work, sponsorship, and just keep showing up. I think that's it. I didn't wet myself. I didn't poop myself. Oh wait, that's on tape, isn't it? Sorry. Thank y'all for letting me share. I'm grateful for the opportunity, and I'm grateful for my sobriety. So thanks.